Prologue. The beginning. It was in the university library that Daniel first saw her. Julia was sitting at a wooden desk near the tall windows. Her long hair was catching the afternoon light as she bit her lip while reading a heavy literature textbook. Occasionally, she would scribble notes into a small notebook lying open on the desk beside her. Daniel, who was there mostly because the Wi-Fi in his dorm had died, found himself stealing glances at her every few seconds. It wasn't just her appearance. There was something about the way she was totally absorbed in her book that captivated him. He sat down at the desk a few rows behind her and tried to focus on his laptop, but every few minutes he found himself drifting off to her. Was it fate or just coincidence that brought him to that particular part of the library? Did she feel his gaze upon her, or was he just deluding himself? Finally mustering up his courage, he stood up, walked over to her desk, and asked, "Do you have a pen I could borrow?" She looked up, startled, then smiled. It was a smile that felt like sunlight after days of rain. "Of course," she said, reaching into her bag. And in that instant, Daniel knew this chance encounter would change something in his life. After returning his laptop to the bag slung over his shoulder, he joined her at the desk. Soon they were talking not just about books, but also music, their classes, their dreams. The afternoon slipped away unnoticed as conversation flowed easily between them. They didn't realize it at first, but they were falling in love right there amidst the towering shelves and the smell of old books. When the library finally closed, Daniel walked her home. As they approached her apartment building, a comfortable silence fell between them. He wasn't sure if he should say something, but before he could think of a witty remark, she turned to him and said, "Thank you for today. I haven't had such a nice conversation in ages." Her cheeks were flushed and her eyes sparkled in the dim lamplight. "Me neither," he admitted, hoping she couldn't hear the tremor in his voice. "I'm glad I met you," she whispered, and he knew he felt the same. That night, Daniel walked home with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. Something had shifted, a melody struck up in his chest, and he couldn't stop humming it as he drifted off to sleep. Something told him this was just the beginning. Chapter 1. Falling in love. The months that followed were painted with warmth. Coffee dates became daily rituals, turning into midnight walks under the starlit sky. Weekends were spent exploring small towns nearby, discovering hidden cafes and antique shops. They shared their fears, their hopes, and their dreams, creating a world where only they existed. He loved her laugh, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, the kindness that radiated from her being. She loved his sense of humor, the way he made her feel safe, and the passion that shone in his eyes when he talked about something he loved. Julia loved to cook, though Daniel often teased her for inventing recipes no one had ever tried before. Burnt pancakes and oddly flavored pasta were their specialty, their kitchen becoming a playground for culinary experiments. Despite the occasional kitchen mishap, their love only deepened. They were young, in love, and unstoppable. When graduation came, they moved into a small rented apartment with peeling wallpaper and a leaky bathroom tap. But to them, it was a castle with high walls and a deep moat. In this place, they created memories that tasted like freedom and hope, promises whispered in the dark, and dreams shared under the covers. Chapter 2. Building a life. They built their life slowly. Daniel got a job in marketing and Julia found her calling as an art teacher in a local school. They saved for vacations, carefully planning trips to countries they had only dreamed of visiting. They decorated their home with second-hand furniture, mismatched lamps, and wall art Julia had painted herself. Friends often remarked how mismatched their furniture was, but it never bothered them. Their love felt unshakable. On their second anniversary, Daniel proposed during a sunset picnic, his hands trembling slightly. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Julia's eyes glistened with tears as she whispered, "Yes," before he could even finish the sentence. They were married in the spring under blooming cherry trees, surrounded by family and friends. Their love story became a tale everyone in their circle knew, a tale of how they met in a library and fell deeply in love. Chapter 3. The first cracks, but life has a way of dulling even the brightest colors. Work grew demanding, and Daniel often came home late, exhaustion etched on his face. Julia, feeling lonely, poured her energy into her students and art projects. The arguments began. At first, they were small things: a dish left in the sink, bills left unpaid, or forgetting to buy milk on the way home. But beneath those arguments lay something heavier, a growing distance neither of them knew how to bridge. They couldn't remember the last time they had watched the sunset together. The silence between them grew louder than their arguments. The shared laughter that once echoed in their evenings was replaced by the quiet hum of the TV. They still loved each other, or so they told themselves, but the closeness was gone. Even physical touch felt mechanical, as though they were playing roles in a script they no longer believed in. Julia started spending weekends at her mother's house to help with the garden, she said, though Daniel knew it was to escape the silence. Daniel buried himself in work, volunteering for extra projects to avoid coming home early. One rainy evening, Julia found herself looking at their wedding photo on the living room shelf. They looked so alive back then. Now they were strangers who happened to share a bed. Chapter for silence. It happened on another rainy day, as if the weather itself had been holding its breath for this moment. Daniel came home early to find Julia sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, her hands wrapped tightly around it. "We need to talk," she said, her voice quiet. Daniel sat across from her, his stomach tightening. He knew what this conversation would be about, but he hoped against hope that maybe it wasn't true. "I think we've lost each other," she whispered, her eyes glistening. He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince her otherwise. Instead, he nodded, tears burning his eyes, because deep down he had known it for months. The weeks that followed were filled with hollow smiles and polite nods. They were trapped in a silent routine, haunted by the ghost of their love. Their conversations consisted of logistics, bills, and schedules, devoid of the warmth that once filled their home. Every shared glance was a reminder of what they once had, a love story that now felt like a faded photograph. Julia started taking long walks, hoping to find herself again amidst the bustling crowds or the serene parks. Daniel immersed himself in work, seeking solace in numbers and deadlines. They were drifting apart, and though it hurt, it was easier than confronting the love that had died. Chapter 5. The conversation. It happened on another rainy day, as if the weather itself had been holding its breath for this moment. Daniel came home early to find Julia sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, her hands wrapped tightly around it. "We need to talk," she said, her voice quiet. Daniel sat across from her, his stomach tightening. He knew what this conversation would be about, but he hoped against hope that maybe it wasn't true. "I think we've lost each other," she whispered, her eyes glistening. He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince her otherwise. Instead, he nodded, tears burning his eyes, because deep down he had known it for months. Chapter 6. The end. They tried counseling. They tried weekend getaways. They tried remembering the people they had been. But every attempt felt forced, like pressing puzzle pieces that no longer fit. A month later, they signed the divorce papers in a quiet office downtown. There were no dramatic fights, no broken plates, just tired souls letting go. Julia moved to a small apartment near the art studio where she taught evening classes. She started painting again, filling her walls with color. Daniel left the city for a quieter town by the coast. He took long walks along the shore, the sound of waves slowly softening the noise inside his mind. They never saw each other again, but sometimes, on rainy afternoons, both would remember that library, that first smile, and the years that had changed them. And somewhere deep inside, both carried the quiet truth. They had loved, and it had been real, even if it couldn't last forever.